Welcome to Stay Sane Now with your host, Claudine Struck. Just when you thought life was out of control, here's a show just for you. Now, the host of Stay Sane Now, Claudine Struck.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Stay Sane Now radio show. I'm your host, Claudine Struck. Thank you for joining us today. The Stay Sane Now radio show is based on my book, How to Stay Sane When Life Isn't. These books offer fast and easy to read tips and tools for renewing your mind, your body, and your spirit, no matter what challenges you may be facing. Taking time to cultivate a healthy mind, body, spirit completes the three-legged stool of contentment. When one falters, we stumble. We are not just bodies nor talking heads. Each of our guests today represent just that, the mind, the body, and the spirit. The theme of our show today has to do with boundaries. What are they? How do you enforce them? Setting boundaries in your life is an important way of taking care of yourself. It is your duty to have boundaries in place to protect yourself from people who try to degrade or belittle you. We are responsible for how others treat us. Today you will hear techniques for getting boundaries into our lives. Let's listen to what our first expert, Stuart GuruStu Rosen, has to say. He will discuss the law of energy, how it works, and how you can use it to manifest your dreams and to strengthen your boundaries. Welcome, Stuart.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. And yourself?
Great, I'm doing awesome. Every day is awesome.
I know there are all these immutable laws out there, laws of the universe. What exactly is the law of energy?
Well, what I like to talk about when it comes to the law of energy, everything in life is energy. Whether you see the sun or every sound that we hear, even if you go into science, if you're not necessarily a religious person, but you think in terms of science, Einstein talked about energy equals matter, E equals mc squared. So everything in life is energy. And so energy has these intrinsic qualities about it that you can actually tap into, that you can manifest the life of your dreams if you know exactly how energy works and how you can pretty much go with the flow of energy. So what I say is energy begins inside with a thought, not just a thought like, oh, what am I going to have for lunch today? Although, I mean, that's certainly a thought. But it has to do with consciousness itself. Life begins at consciousness. And that thought energy is what turns into everything that exists in the world. It travels from our mind into our bodies. And our bodies have these chemical reactions to whatever our thoughts are. I mean, we can definitely measure those things. If we're fearful, certain endorphins are released into our brain, all of a sudden the anxiety, the blood pressure goes up. So our body has these sensations that we call emotions. We also then transfer this energy into some form of an action. And these actions are what manifest the world. The actions send the energy out into the world. And the energy that's out in the world then causes certain reactions. Actions create reactions, cause and effect, karma, whatever you want to call it. But our energy goes out into the world and interacts with all the other energy that's out there.
You're listening to Stay Sane Now with your host, Claudine Struck. Now, back to Claudine.
Welcome back. I'm Claudine Struck, the host of Stay Sane Now. Our next guest is Julie Fuimano. She's a masterful coach whose passion is educating and coaching her clients to create amazing relationships at home, at work, and with themselves. Named one of the top 100 thought leaders in personal leadership development, Julie is an accomplished writer with over 100 published articles and is author of The Journey Called You, A Roadmap to Self-Discovery and Acceptance. Welcome, Julie. Boundaries, we know, are in place to help protect us, but not everyone is raised with this idea of proper boundaries. So what is your definition of a boundary?
Well, like you said, boundaries are this imaginary line, if you will, that keeps out the negative or needy or inappropriate behavior of others and does provide us with protection and keeps us safe. So it's really a very simple definition of what boundaries are. The first step really is to identify what doesn't feel good for you. How would you want to be treated? boundaries, that's kind of the definition of boundaries includes that this is your line. This is where you draw the line as to what you want, how you want to be treated. And you're right, so many of us are brought up in households where the boundary lines are blurred. And as adults, we have to then start to identify what does feel good, how do I want to be treated, and recognize what doesn't feel good. And that's really the first step, is identifying how we want to be treated. And then the second step, of course, is to communicate those to others. Because just because we say, look, I don't want you to barge in, my door's closed, please knock first, doesn't mean that the other person knows that, especially if it's somebody and they've been doing it for years. And so when we decide that we want to be treated a certain way, look, when I do something nice for you, I would like to be appreciated. You need to thank me, or at least acknowledge that the acceptance of this, whatever I did.
You're listening to Stay Sane Now with your host, Claudine Struck. Now, back to Claudine.
Welcome back. I'm Claudine Struck, the host of Stay Sane Now. Our next guest is Robin Wright, the founder of A Balanced Life, LLC. Welcome, Robin.
Well, thank you, Claudine. I'm so glad to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for being on this particular show. So how would one deal with others with new boundaries?
You're absolutely right that those dynamics do change as we start to, as you say, grow and develop. But I think a good place is to make sure that we're communicating what our new boundaries are to, our family, our friends, our coworkers. I don't believe that we can expect for them to be mind readers. So I just think that it's important that we're able to articulate to them what it is we will accept or permit in our lives and what it is that we will no longer accept or permit in our lives.
Well, our first guest sort of defined boundaries as almost like energy in a balloon, and where the energy meets the outside air, that's the boundary.
Mm-hmm. I do think that tolerations play a big role in boundaries. But before we even get to tolerations, I feel that first we have to define our sense of integrity. I think integrity, goes hand in hand with what it is we will not and what we will allow people to do to or for us. And when I say developing a sense of integrity, I think that's just knowing truly who you are, what your expectations are of yourself and your life, and what your expectations are of how you will treat others in return. And so once that has been identified and you've kind of, worked out the whole integrity piece, then I think that you should look at your tolerations. And those would be those things that, you're just kind of putting up with, which it could be, your financial situation, your physical environment, the way someone talks to you or treats you. So once you're able to figure those things out and realize that, I'm worth better than this, then that's when you can draw those imaginary lines and say, these are my boundaries. You can only go but so far. I think it's important that we have to be advocates for ourselves. So often we're advocates for our children, charitable organizations, or a cause, but sometimes we focus of us.
Thank you again for joining us on Stay Sane Now with Claudine Struck. Stay sane over the next week, and we'll meet again next Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, here on Seventh Wave Network.
And my own sovereign nation, dedicated to a transformation.